What's up YouTube? My name is Caden and you're watching Gas It Garage. In today's video, we are going to be finally getting this thing ready to take on its first test drive. We're going to be changing the oil in this engine, putting some coolant in the radiator, and I'm also going to be fixing the rear brakes as well as installing front brakes on this thing to make it safe so we can actually stop. And then I'm also going to adjust some things on the engine because we did get it running in the last video, but it didn't really run that great. So I'm going to try and adjust a couple things on these throttle bodies, including the idle speed because it was idling a little bit low. And then I'm just going to go over it and just make sure everything is ready to go. And then we can hopefully take this thing on its maiden voyage. Enjoy the video. Alright guys, so in the last video of this project, we finally got this big giant engine running. And it sounds really mean, and it's actually a lot louder than I thought it would be, especially because the baffles are still in the mufflers. But it wasn't running that great and it was idled too low. So like I said in the intro, I'm going to have to idle this thing up a little bit and probably adjust the synchronization on the throttle bodies, and then also adjust some of the vacuum screws as well to kind of get this thing to even out a little bit. And hopefully it'll kind of start running better once I have coolant in it, and also when I let it run for a little while longer. So the ECU can kind of acclimate to all of its adjustments that it has to make. And hopefully it'll run better after that. But for right now, let's go ahead and get the oil changed on this thing. And I was going to actually do that in the last video, but I wanted to wait until we got the engine running, just to kind of knock loose any sort of debris or grime that had built up in the engine over the years. And I wanted to get it running to knock all of that loose and get it into the bottom of the oil so it'll drain out when we change the oil. Now I will have to take off the front header right here to get to the oil filter under there to replace it, but it shouldn't be too difficult. So let's go ahead and get a pan under this thing, get the oil drained, and start changing the oil in this thing. All right, guys, so we just got the oil changed in this thing. So now it's time to fill up the radiator with coolant. But before we do that, I actually bought a temperature gauge right here that we're going to install. It's basically just this little inline fitting right here. So I have to cut about probably 1.5 inch gap in the hose, put this in, and then wire it up and mount the gauge. And then once that's done, then we can fill this thing up with a 50-50 mix of coolant and distilled water. So let's go ahead and get the gauge installed and get this thing filled up with coolant. And I'm also going to bleed the system, so I will have to start the engine up to do that. And while I'm doing it, I'm going to run the engine for a little while to not only bleed the system, but also so the ECU can kind of acclimate. I got this thing partially filled up with coolant and distilled water. We did have one little leak down here. There's actually this little bolt hole in a part of the water pump, and there was no bolt in it, so it was just dripping out like crazy. And I was like, where is that coming from? And then I looked and there was a hole there. So I had to put a self-tapping bolt in it. It still leaks a little bit, but I might try later and put some sealant over it to seal that hole up. So I'm gonna go ahead and start this thing just to bleed the coolant system out. I'm actually gonna try just spinning it over first and see what that does. That's the little thing working here. I gotta zip tie the clutch real quick. It is in neutral, but you do have to have the clutch pulled in. That's on. I'm just gonna spin it over first and see what it does. Yep, it's going down a little bit, so let's add some more. That's a little too much. I'm going to put the cap on, start this thing up and see what happens. I still do need to get a stronger battery for this thing so I don't have to keep jumping it off. Because last time I figured out that I had to jump this thing off because the battery doesn't have enough amperage to be able to have a consistent 12 volts for the fuel injectors while it's cranking. So I have to jump it off like this. I'm going to look at this for a second. All right, we have spark, so I'm not sure why it's not starting, but got spark, fuel pump's working. All right, I'm going to try and start this thing up just off camera, and then I'll turn the camera back on when it's running. All right, it's been running for about 5 minutes now, and we are at 170, so I think it's pretty good. I think we can go ahead and turn it off. I did have the fan running over there, so I didn't gas myself out in here. Yeah, this thing runs a whole lot better, and I found it does rev a little bit better now that it's kind of acclimated and heated up and everything. And it almost revved a little bit better with the air filter out. And I actually had to take that out to start it up with a little bit of brake clean because I wasn't wanting to start up on its own. But I think I'm going to let this thing cool down now, especially since the cooling system is filled up and bled. And then, yeah, I think we can go ahead and move on to doing the brakes on this thing. And then after that, it's time for a test drive. All right, so I'm still waiting on the brakes that I ordered to get here. So for right now, let's go ahead and get the old rear brakes completely removed. All right, so I just got the brake kit from Amazon. It did come with brake discs, but we already have front and rear discs on this thing, so we don't need to put those on. But this kit is basically just an entire full front and rear brake system with one dual piston master cylinder right here. So we'll have one pedal that will be hooked up to both front and rear brakes on this thing. And I think I have most of the mounts done already, so this should be pretty easy to do. So let's go ahead and get this out of the box and get everything bolted onto the go-kart. So we just got the brakes done on this thing. I've got all three calipers mounted. The front ones actually had mounts that were already there from factory, so I literally just had to bolt the front calipers on. But the rear one I did have to make a custom bracket for because it's a weird type of caliper that I've never seen before. It actually has a built-in parking brake on it, which is pretty cool. So we can add that in a little bit later. And then I've got the master cylinder mounted and it bolted right up. And then I ran all the brake lines as well. And this system is pre-bled, so we don't have to worry about going through the huge hassle of bleeding 3 brake calipers and 3 brake lines with one master cylinder. Because let me tell you, that would probably be a nightmare. So anyway, the brakes are done. I do have to adjust the front ones a little bit because if I roll it back and forth like this and hit the brakes, it locks up the rear end, but not the front end. So I do need to adjust that a little bit, but I think after I do that, we should be good to go to take this thing on its first test drive. All right, guys, I've got the 360 camera mounted on the front, and then I've got the GoPro on my helmet. And then I'm either gonna have my brother or my dad hold my phone to get some other cool shots of this thing, but it is finally time to take this beast for a test drive. So I'm gonna get a helmet on, get this thing started up and warmed up, and then we will take it on its maiden voyage. I'm super excited. Figure out why this thing isn't wanting to go when I put it in gear. All right, I just bypassed the kickstand sensor, so hopefully that was our issue. So let's just go ahead and try this again.
Chain!
This thing's got some power though, I will say.
Woo! So what do you do in the situation when your chain dumps right when you're at the top of a hill?
All right, just got the chain back on. I'm probably gonna have to mess with that chain tensioner a little bit, but this is take two. I'm actually going to go mess with this chain tensioner a little bit to try and get it a little bit more aligned, because it is not very well aligned and the chain keeps popping off. So let me go fix that and then we'll try and ride this thing again. All right, so I took the GoPro off because the battery was dead and it just keeps dying on me. So I got the chain tensioner, I think, fixed on this thing. I just had to put some shims in it so it didn't wobble around as much, because the sprocket size has a larger bore than the shaft it's on. So I just had to put a couple of shims in there to get it more centered on it. So now the chain's a little bit tighter and it shouldn't pop off this time. And it's also aligned better. So hopefully we should be able to drive this thing for more than 10 seconds.
Oh my gosh, he moves! Whoa!
This thing has some ponies, man. Holy. Okay, chains are still attached. Oh, we lost a keyway. That's fun. Yeah, I figured that might happen. I'm gonna go grab another keyway and come back down here, and also I'll grab a hose clamp to put that in. But man, this thing has got some power. Holy cow.
That's never a good sign when you see the driver walking away from the vehicle. What'd you do?
Well, it's geared way too short, and also the keyway fell out, so I gotta go grab another one. All right, so I came back down here with a new keyway, and I put it in right there with a hose clamp to hold it because I couldn't get it all the way in. Because originally on this jack shaft, I did actually grind in that keyway with just an angle grinder, so it's not perfectly straight or square. So the keyway wasn't wanting to go all the way in. So I got it probably about, I don't know, a 1/4 inch in, which should be enough to get back to the house. But I think this thing is absolutely awesome so far. It's got an insane amount of torque. Although one big thing I'm noticing is that it is geared way too short. You probably heard how much it was revving up in the 360 video, but luckily I do have the other sprocket on there so I can change it over fairly easily, but the chain didn't pop off this time, which is cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing turned back around, head back to the house, and try and get that keyway all the way in, and then we will drive this thing around some more. All right, let's head back to the house, and hopefully this keyway doesn't fall back out. Something happened because I lost drive again. So I did notice that this thing does have a pretty significant oil leak under here. And it's dripping from, I think, the clutch cover gasket. So what I'm probably going to have to end up doing is either cut this bar out and this one, or what I can maybe do, since there is just barely enough clearance in there, is I can undo all the bolts, pop it out just enough to where I can get some ultra black gasket maker in between the sealing surfaces, and hopefully get this thing to seal up properly. But for right now, I'm gonna fix this keyway, and then I will probably get on that before we take this thing out to drive more, because I do want to get some more footage of this thing, because let me tell you, this thing is stupid fast. It's just got so much torque. But we do also need to change the gearing, but I'll probably do that off camera because you've already seen me work on this rear end enough. So just do the rest of this off camera, and then we will take this thing out for more driving. All right, so I haven't fixed the oil leak yet, but I did change the gearing on this. I went down to the original sprocket that was on here, and it is quite a bit smaller. So I'm kind of looking forward to see how this thing performs with this taller gearing on here. And then I also put some hose clamps on the jack shaft there so the keyways don't come out again. And then I did a couple adjustments to the brakes back here because it was rattling around and making some noise because the bolts on the hub were actually hitting the mount, so I had to grind them down a little bit. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little tab, and I already welded the bolt right there, but I actually ran out of welding wire again. So I have to go out and get some more, but it's going to go on there like that because I did notice that the header had popped off. And then I also removed the side stand switch because this is a go-kart. You obviously don't need a kickstand on it. And for whatever reason, it wasn't working properly, and it was preventing the engine from running as soon as you put it in gear. So I basically just spliced the wires together right there and completely bypassed it. So I still have to fix the oil leak, which I'll do off camera, like I said, and then I will finish welding that on. And then tomorrow we will take this thing out for a real test. All right, so I think I've got everything ready to go to take this thing on another ride. I put the 360 camera in a different location so I can get a different angle. And I also remounted the exhaust right there. I put the hose clamps on the keyways right there, like I said before. And then I actually had to replace the throttle cable in this thing with one that is adjustable on both ends, because before it was just adjustable on one end and that end was like super janky, and I was messing with it in the garage and it actually stuck wide open, but thankfully the engine was off, so nothing bad happened. But thankfully I was able to see that in the garage and it didn't happen while I was driving, because that would have been really bad, especially with 120 horsepower in a go-kart. So I'm gonna get a helmet on and test this thing out with the new gearing and see how it drives. I haven't fixed the oil leak yet, but I think we should be okay for one more quick test drive before I fix that. So I'm gonna get a helmet on, turn the 360 on, and take this thing out for an actual test drive. So hopefully nothing breaks this time. All right, so I got the Gulu hooked up because it doesn't like to start when it's cold without it, so. Chain popped off. All right, let me go grab the chain. All right, well, I'm walking back to the house. Chain broke. I think I had it too tight, so I'm gonna try and figure this out. But first I have to bring the thing back to the house, and in order to do that, I have to go grab a new master link. So I'm gonna do that real quick, and then I'll hop back on and drive it back to the house. All right, so I just got the chain back on, and I actually ran the chain underneath the chain tensioner right here, so it's a little bit looser than it was, but hopefully it won't be skipping like it was before. Now I could always put a slightly larger sprocket on here to help guide the chain, but I think this might work. So let's go ahead and try that. Yeah, this video is definitely not going to plan, but it's usually the way these things go. is kind of spraying oil everywhere, and the chain is skipping like crazy. Yeah, I gotta align the chain a little bit better, but yeah, this thing rips. This thing absolutely rips. But we are leaking quite a bit more oil. I definitely have to fix that oil leak because it's puking oil everywhere. But yeah, this thing is insane. All right, so it's leaking a good bit of oil right there, and looks like we may be mixing with something in there. I'm not 100% sure, but other than the oil spraying everywhere and the chain popping off again, this thing absolutely rips. The acceleration is insane, and the gearing honestly is a lot better. I'm glad I changed it, but I think the next step for this thing is to figure out the chain issue because it keeps skipping teeth really bad and popping off, and it's not perfectly aligned, so I'll have to mess with that. But and I also got to fix the oil leak. But I think overall this thing is 100% awesome. But unfortunately, that is all the time I have to film this week. So I know the test drive didn't exactly go as planned on this thing, but that's usually the way these things go. Sometimes there's things that happen like the chain, the oil leak, and that kind of thing that you just don't expect. And I am pretty much out of time to film. I got to edit the video to post it tomorrow. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. And in the next video, we will hopefully get this thing fully ripping. I'm going to fix the oil leak, fix the chain issues, and then we will take this thing probably off-road somewhere, possibly at Mini Mayhem, because that's coming up here in about 2 weeks from the time of filming this right now. So that said, I will see you in the next video where we're actually going to rip this thing around. So stay tuned for that, and thanks for watching.